Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in AP English and the World of Ideas lectures. We're now in lecture number 17. This is Robert Reich's Why the Rich Are Getting Richer and the Poor Poorer. This is an essay taken from Reich's 1991 work, The Work of Nations. Think about the title, The Wealth of Nations of Adam Smith, and you'll get a sense of it. By the way, the subtitle was Preparing Ourselves for 21st Century Capitalism. Now, we're in Unit 3 here, and this is, of course, our unit on wealth. I've already given lectures at number 14 at learnstrong.net in the AP folder for World of Ideas for Smith's Wealth of Nations. I just mentioned it. Lecture 15 was over Marx's Communist Manifesto, and we have finished now at lecture 16 with Gilbert's The Affluent Society, cutting from that. Our assumptions are that you have been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, especially lectures 1 through 16. Again, you can find that in the AP folder. And as well, our assumptions are that you've been paying attention to our learning theory, the ability to connect new information to old information in meaningful ways through our reading. We do that in annotation at level 1. We ask, what does the text say? And we do a paragraph outline at level 2. What does the text mean at 2A? Themes, messages, and our big 5. What is this text going to tell us about epistemology, ontology, psychology, sociology, and as well theodicy, the question existence of pain, suffering in the world. At level 2B, we are concerned about rhetoric. We'll pay attention to that here in a moment. And then finally at level 3, how can I relate to this information in some meaningful way? That is to say, to other titles that we've been working with and that other texts that I know, and as well, how can I relate to myself? Let's do some quick biography of Robert Reich. He is still alive, born in 1946. He served as an economist and a consultant to several presidents, Presidents Ford, Carter, Clinton, and President Obama. Major political commentator and contributor today. He did teach at Harvard for a spell in economics and political science. He questions fundamentally the existence of free trade by pointing to the effect of government taxation on business enterprise. Published over 18 different texts. The Next American Frontier in '83, The Work of Nations, the one that we're working with here from 1991. Even has a Netflix show, for those of you that are interested in that, Saving Capitalism. In 2017, he released that. Now, in terms of the rhetoric, I just want to use what Jacobus provides for us on page 252. Just read with me. He says, the structure of why the rich are getting richer and the poor poorer is built on a metaphor, a word picture, that of boats rising or falling with the tide. As Reich notes, quote, all Americans used to be in roughly the same economic boat, paragraph number 2. And when the economic tide rose, most people rose along with it. However, today, quote, national borders no longer define our economic fate, end quote. Reich therefore views Americans today as being in different boats depending on their role in the economy. And his essay follows the fates of 3 distinctive kinds of workers. The first one, examining the routine worker. He observes the boat containing routine producers is sinking rapidly. We'll meet that one in paragraph 3. He will continue the boat metaphor with in-person servers. The boat that carries these workers, he says in paragraph 20, quote, is sinking as well, but somewhat more slowly or unevenly, okay? Workers in restaurants, retail outlets, car washes, other personal service industries, often work part-time and have few health or other benefits, right? Their jobs obviously imperiled by machines. Finally, third group, Reich argues that the, quote, vessel containing America's symbolic analysts is rising, end quote, paragraph 28. A third group, containing the population identifies and solves problems, brokers ideas. A whole lot was made from this essay in the 21st century for you guys, for example, in the field of education theory. In other words, if Reich was true and right, then we have to begin to help educate you guys to be able to do more of this kind of third boat-like activities. Let's just turn now to the essay itself and do some level 1 work. Let's just get a sense of the style here. It's very clear, very articulate style. Let's take a look. Regardless, he says on page 253, regardless of how your job is officially classified, manufacturing, service, managerial, technical, secretarial, and so on, or the industry in which you work, automotive, steel, computer, advertising, finance, food processing, your real competitive position in the world economy is coming to depend on the function you perform it in. You perform in it. Herein lies the basic reason why incomes are diverging. The fortunes of routine producers are declining. In-person servers are also becoming poorer, although their fates are less clear-cut. But symbolic analysts who solve, identify, broker new problems are by and large succeeding in the world economy. All Americans used to be in roughly the same economic boat. Most rose or fell together as the corporations in which they were employed, the industries comprising such corporations, the national economy as a whole became more productive or languished. But national borders no longer define our economic fates. We are now in different boats, one sinking rapidly, one sinking more slowly, and the third rising steadily. Notice, rhetorically speaking, the genius of how this is set up for us, right? Let's go through this now. Paragraph number 1 we just read, obviously he says it. In the United States, a worker's role in the economy determines his or her financial success. Symbolic analysts, people who identify, solve problems, are succeeding, while service workers are doing badly, and routine production workers are doing even worse. Paragraphs 2 through 3. In the past, regardless of their role in the economy, most American workers shared similar fortunes based on the health of the nation's economy as a whole. As the middle class grew and brought more of the products it produced, the national economy flourished. Paragraphs 4 through 10. But as new technology permits quick, efficient, and expensive transmittal of information around the world, many major American companies are using cheaper labor that is readily available in other countries. As a result, not only are there fewer jobs in the United States in both heavy industries such as manufacturing and light industries such as data processing and computer programming, but the wages and benefits of those that still exist are declining. This pattern is occurring not just in the United States but all over the world. In this regards, Reich has often been referred to as a prophet, obviously writing this even before the 21st century. Paragraphs 11 through 15. While production workers in developing countries benefit by getting more and better jobs, workers in advanced economies suffer. Unions and collective bargaining agreements that used to protect these workers are no longer effective, in part because of the decline in the traditional unionized industries. Paragraph 16 through 18. Lower and middle management production jobs are also disappearing. Foreign companies are doing some production here using American workers, but technology is making many of these workers obsolete. Reich was able to predict what in fact has transpired in large measure. Many of the jobs that used to be worked in America now are being shipped, as often is said, proverbially overseas, although we know that it goes not just across oceans. Paragraph 19. The decline in routine jobs has hurt men more than women because men's jobs in manufacturing traditionally paid more than women's jobs in textiles and data processing. The gender gap in wages began to close in the early 1980s, not because women were making more money, but because men were making less. This continues to be a somewhat controversial topic, as we have talked about in other lectures. Paragraph 20 through 24. Service industry jobs are also in trouble, although less dramatically. Service workers who earn less than production workers and have fewer, if any, benefits now have to compete with former production workers, people who would have looked for production work were available, and of course immigrants. Like production workers, service workers are also threatened by labor-saving machinery and technology. Paragraphs 25 and 26. The fortunes of service workers will temporarily improve due to changing demographics, but the standard of living of service workers won't really improve because the people demanding their services won't have enough money to pay for them. Therefore, the workers themselves will bear the brunt in the form of taxes and Social Security. Obviously, Reich saw something on the horizon that we are experiencing to some degree today. Paragraph 27. The service workers' standard of living also depends indirectly on the standard of living of those they service. If the latter do well in world commerce, they'll have more money to spend on service workers, what sometimes had been called to trickle-down economics, right? Paragraphs 28 through 36. The outlook for America's symbolic analysts, on the other hand, is bright, especially for those at the highest levels. Demand for their ideas has grown steadily as new technologies allow them to communicate their ideas effectively, rapidly, cheaply. Think about this. He wrote this before the rise of the great powers of, for example, Google as we know it today. Symbolic analysts include anyone who works with images, ideas. Symbolic analysts not only make large sums of money, but unlike those in production and service jobs, enjoy their work. And while this this is a somewhat relative argument. I mean, that you can find a whole lot of people that work, obviously, doing this that don't always enjoy their work. But theoretically, because they're creative, they are enjoying their work more. Paragraphs 37 through 41. At mid-century, when America was a national market dominated by major corporations, there were constraints on the earnings of people at the highest level. No one was supposed to make too much or too little. This way, the workers had money to spend and national economic growth continued. But by the 1990s, notice the use of the historical precedent to look backward and now looking forward, symbolic analysts' earnings were unlimited. And of course, we're familiar with this idea, leading to some economic crashes as well, aren't we? Paragraphs 42 to 44 and finish of this cutting, major American corporations were vanishing in the 1990s, as were the ethics associated with them. This is an important one for Reich, the notion that in business, ethics play a chief role. As American corporations sold goods and services all over the world, there was no connection between the bosses and their workers, many of whom were not even in the United States. The purchasing power of American workers became far less relevant to a company's economic survival, and top executives are getting richer while the workers are seemingly getting poorer. Well, let's deal now with level 2 and 3 quickly. At level 2, what are the big five? Well, epistemologically, what is it that Reich is saying? I think he's making the argument that what we can know, that it's pretty clear the fallibilist argument makes more sense than the absolutist one. That is to say, I think I'm right, but I could be wrong. A lot of what Reich was saying was, I think this is the trending, let's pay attention to it. Ontologically, what does this text say about who we are? We know that we got to survive our competitive nature, and it's going to happen through cooperation. This notion of different kinds of boats is a part of this, how we can all sail, if you will. Psychologically, what does this text say? Well, fear and the need for security is a powerful motivator, no doubt about it, especially when you start to look at the landscape and you begin to wonder if you're going to even have an opportunity for a job. I know some of you guys have voiced this as you start to think about beginning your university experience. What will I major in? Where will the jobs be, etc. It's hard to predict that even sometimes. Psychologically, that leads to some anxiety, no question. Sociologically, of course, we got to float together. That is to say, all these boats, this boat metaphor is a powerful one, isn't it? What does this text say about theodicy? I think it's clear. Reich's arguing that when bad things happen, economically speaking, one must ask, as a group of people must ask, not why is this happening to us, but finally, why is this happening for us? You've got to find a way to come to certain resolutions and to get out of the situation, right? What are the messages here at 2A? Well, we got to take care of the least of us, no question. We've got to pay attention to those in that boat that is sinking, no doubt about it. We can't just say, well, let that boat sink and we'll all be fine. Why? Because we're all in this world together. Another major message. We're all in this together. There is no necessarily just I. There's always the we have to contend with and consider. We got to learn, I think another major message here is to find new solutions to economic problems, because the new problems are going to demand new solutions. We can't go back to old ways of thinking, I think Reich would argue. At 2B, rhetoric. Note the power of the boat metaphor. It is a compelling one as you read through this essay. Notice as well the simple language, the simple style. Very direct, very to the point. Learn to write this way and you'll be a much more effective writer, no question about it. And finally, level 3, and how can I relate this to other titles? Well, we got to mention Plato's Republic, because of course that's the standard text in many ways for us when we look backwards to what was already being set on the horizon as concerns for a state or a group of people. Think about the titles we've already worked with. Adam Smith and his notion of the invisible hand, as we were talking about it in Free Enterprise and Capitalism, or the critique of that in Marx's Communist Manifesto, or Gilbert's notion about poverty, and analyze for yourself how each one of those texts would respond to the positions of Reich. What is your favorite text, just to finish now with 3A, what's your favorite text about industry and economics? The two famous films of Oliver Stone's, if you're not familiar with it, Wall Street from the 1987 offering, and then the follow-up Wall Street 2, as it's sometimes referred to, Money Never Sleeps, in 2010. Both of these are just a single example of a film, a text that plays around with questions of economics, and of course economics as it relates to the broader question of morals. Finally, at 3B, we are finishing, of course, with unit number 3 now, in wealth. How about these questions, just for you to think about? Is it true you are your money? Is it true that if you had been born into a different kind of economic situation, you might be a different you than you are now, both physiologically as well as emotively and cognitively? What about this one? What's your view of economics given the titles that we've been studying? Which one of the 4 did you most resonate with, and why? Okay, or which one of the 4 did you find disturbing, and why? And finally, do you think money will matter for you more, and wealth will matter for you more as you age than it did when you were younger? And how much wealth do you think you will need to consider yourself successful and happy in 20 years? Like, what will that look like? And take into consideration the fact that some of the people who are adults in your life now, by the time you hit your economic stride, will maybe need your help economically. Does that factor at all in your thinking? Well, that's Unit 3. I hope you've been challenged to think a bit more about economics and wealth. We now turn to Unit 4 in the Jacobus volume, World of Ideas, and he will label it mind, which is, of course, an interesting word in and of itself. We'll come back to it to enjoy. I hope you're learning from these conversations. Thank you.